Socio-cultural psychology is a branch of psychological theory and practice associated with Lev Vygotsky and Alexander Lyria and the Circle, who initiated it in the mid-1920s-1930s. The phrase cultural historical psychology never occurs in the writings of Vygotsky, and was subsequently ascribed to him by his critics and followers alike. Yet it is under this title that this intellectual movement is widely known now. The main goal of Vygotsky-Luria project was the establishment of a new psychology that would account for the inseparable unity of mind, brain and culture in the development in concrete socio-historical settings and throughout the history of humankind as socio-biological species. History. Lev Vygotsky, born in Osh, Russia in 1896, was a psychologist who contributed mostly to developmental psychology. Vygotsky posed that in a social environment, children develop higher cognitive functions in practical activities. His theories were controversial in the Soviet Union and they remained virtually unknown, although introduced into the Western world in the 1930s, until the 1970s. This is when they became a pivotal point in models built in developmental and educational psychology. Although many current scholars do not agree with his theories or agree about what he meant, the 21st century has brought about scholarly re-evaluations of many of the important aspects of these theories. Alexander Lyria, a neuropsychologist and developmental psychologist, together with Vygotsky, he helped create cultural historical psychology and was a leader of the Vygotsky Circle. Separate to his work with Vygotsky, Lyria is known for his case studies, The Mind of a Mnemonist and The Man with a Shattered World, the former being a case study about a man with a highly advanced memory and the latter about a man with traumatic brain injury. The theory, cultural historical psychology of the socio-cultural theory, is a developmental theory developed by Lev Vygotsky and Alexander Lyria. The theory focuses on the individual development of people and the important contributions that society makes to them. Vygotsky believed that the development of higher-order functions are a result of parents, caregivers, peers and the culture at large. According to Vygotsky, every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level, and later on the individual level, first between people and then inside the child. This applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to the formation of concepts. All the high functions originate as actual relationships between individuals. Quote, "This theory focuses on not only individual learning and the influences adults and peers have on learning, but on how cultural beliefs and attitudes affect instruction and learning." Vygotsky stated that children are born with basic biological constraints on the minds. Each culture, however, provides what he referred to as tools of intellectual adaptation. These tools allow children to use the basic mental abilities in a way that is adaptive to the culture in which they live. The benefits and failings of the theory. The larger project of the new psychology of Vygotsky and Lyria failed, and no universal integrative theory of human mind and development was built by the time of Vygotsky's death in 1934 or, for that matter, ever after. However, the earlier intellectual effort and the legacy of the Soviet scholars of the 1920s-1930s was not entirely wasted and later developed in a range of special, typically loosely related fields of psychological theory and practice such as cultural and child psychology and education, neuropsychology, or psycholinguistics. Other notable areas of theory and practice that are in the dialogue with the cultural historical tradition of Vygotsky and Lyria are psychotherapy, theory of art, dialogical science, cognitive science, semiotics and, in the words of Oliver Sacks' somewhat vague perspective, mindset and philosophy of romantic science. Zones of proximal development. The zone of proximal development measures the difference between what the learner can do by themselves, what they can do with guidance, and what they are not yet able to do. The zone of proximal development was developed in the last 10 years of Vygotsky's life. This concept has not yet been fully developed, as Vygotsky died before the majority of this concept could be completed and introduced. The theory of the zone of proximal development was created to argue against the use of academic, knowledge-based testing to gain understanding of students' intelligence. This concept was also introduced to develop further Jean Piaget's theory of children being lone learners. Vygotsky posed that, if two children perform the same on a test, are the levels of development the same? He came to the conclusion that the children's level of development were not the same. Due to his untimely death, his work was interrupted and his concept of the zone of proximal development remained mostly incomplete. Influences. The major influences on cultural historical psychology were the mechanist neurophysiology of Ivan Pavlov and Vladimir Bekhterev, philosophy of language and culture of Wilhelm von Humboldt and his followers, socio-economic philosophy of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and, primarily, holistic German-American Gestalt psychology, specifically the works of Max Wertheimer and Kurt Lewin. The holism of the German-American Gestaltists gradually became the dominant theoretical framework of cultural historical psychology of Vygotsky and Lyria in the 1930s and virtually totally eradicated Vygotsky's physiological mechanism and reductionism of the 1920s. A few of these earlier influences were subsequently downplayed, misunderstood, or even totally ignored and forgotten. Thus, cultural historical psychology, understood as the Vygotsky-Luria project, originally intended by its creators as an integrative and, later, holistic new psychology of socio-biological and cultural development, should not be confused with later self-proclaimed Vygotskyan theories and fields of studies. Ignorant of the historical roots and the intended breadth and depth of the original proposal and its consistent emphasis on the need in a new theory of consciousness. These include such as socio-cultural psychology, socio-historical psychology, activity theory, cultural psychology, or cultural historical activity theory. The differences between Piaget and Vygotsky. Vygotsky created a theory similar to those of Freud, Skinner and Piaget and was considered a contemporary of such. However, due to his early death and the suppressing of his work in Russia at the time of Stalin, he was left in obscurity. In recent times, his work has become more widely known and published, and as a result of this, his ideas have become more influential in the areas of child development, cognitive psychology and education. He placed more emphasis on the influence of social factors on development, while Piaget emphasized that a child's interactions and explorations influence development. Vygotsky believed that an essential role is played by social interactions in cognitive development. Piaget also posed that development of a child is universal, while Vygotsky believed that cognitive development differs between different cultures. Vygotsky's circle. Vygotsky and Lyria informally collaborated with other psychologists, educationalists, medical specialists, physiologists, and neuroscientists. The foundation of the integrative science of the mind, brain, and behavior in the biosocial development was the main work of the circle. They incorporated ideas of social and interpersonal relations, the practices of empirical scientific research, and Stalinist science, founded on the discursive practices of Soviet science in the 1930s. There were around 36 people involved in the research for Vygotsky's theory, at different periods of time. In 1924, the circle was formed in Moscow after Vygotsky moved from from Gomel, Belarus. At the Institute of Psychology he met Zankov, Soloviev, Sakharov, and Varshava, as well as Alexander Lyria, with whom he would go on to collaborate with. The group grew at a gradual rate and all research was conducted in Moscow, Kharkov, and Leningrad, located in the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union was invaded by Germany during the Great Patriotic War, the group disbanded, and any further post-Vygotskyan research after the beginning of World War II was conducted by Lyria, Leontiev, Zankov, and Elkonin, Vygotsky's circle collaborators. Vladimir Alexeyevich Artemov, Rosa Abramovna Averbach, Philip Veniaminovich Basin, Nikolai Alexandrovich Kozyrov, Esfir Zomanovna Bean, Gita Vasilyevna Byronbaum, Boskis Rakilmarkovna, Lydia Ilnichna Bozhovich, Danyushevsky Israel Isakovich, Nikolai Fedorovich Dobanin, Marina Borisovna Idanova, Sergei Eisenstein, Elkonin Daniel Borisovich, Frida Yosifovna Fradkina, Solomon Grigorovich Gelestein, Leah Soluvona Geshelina, Nina Nikolaevna Karlina, Vladimir Mikhailovich Kogan, Tatyana Efimovna Konnikova, Yulia Vladimirovna Kotelova, Mark Samuelovich Lebedinsky, Myra Abramovna Levina, Rosa Evgenovna Levina, Alexei N. Leontiev, Kurt Lewin, Natalia Alexandrovna Menchinskaya, Natalia Grigorovna Morozova, E.I. Pashkovskaya, Leonid Solomonovich Sakharov, Nikolai Vailovich Samukin, A.A. Chine, Vera Schmidt, Josephina Ilinchna H.I.F., Leah Solomon Vislavina, Ivan Mikhailovich Solovev, Boris Efimovich Varshava, K.I. Verasotskaya, Leonid Vladimirovich Zankov, Alexander Zaporozhes, Bluma Zygany. This list does not include people who collaborated with Lyria who did not have direct contact with Vygotsky.